Cyberpunk 2077's history is messy. Over-the-top hype, marketing out of this world, promises of an immersive, cutting-edge game, and then just crushing disappointment. But somehow, 3 years later, we are still here talking about this game, and not just because of the release of its first and final DLC. Yes, you should play Phantom Liberty, it's fucking awesome. But let's address the elephant in the room. The massive 2.0 update was not so much about the new DLC as it was about experiencing Cyberpunk 2077 as it was originally intended. A masterpiece. Besides potentially being the messiest and most controversial AAA game in the past few years, Cyberpunk 2077 is a unique RPG. It's packed with cool characters, challenging quests, and out-of-this-world weapons and cybernetic enhancements to experiment with. The real star of Cyberpunk 2077, however, isn't V or Johnny Silverhand. It's Night City. First imagined by William Gibson in his novel Neuromancer, Night City is the nexus of everything cyberpunk. The clash of East and West, of giant corporations and solo mercenaries, and of old and new. Every story in Cyberpunk 2077 is a story about Night City. They only make sense in this specific place and at this specific time. What makes Night City so interesting to explore is not it being the ultimate representation of a dystopian future, even though it is, but that in a very fascinating and almost disturbing way, Night City feels real. Just like any city we live in, it's messy and chaotic, and that chaos tells 1,000 stories. Everywhere you turn in Night City, you can see decades of unwritten history, whether that's the unfinished mall in Pacifica, the crowded vendor stands in Jig Jig Street, or the massive garbage dump under the highway leading out of town. There are environmental stories everywhere, and they're easy to get lost in. Or they would have been, if the game worked like it was supposed to. At launch, Cyberpunk 2077 was anything but immersive. The whole game was riddled with bugs that constantly reminded you that this massive, teeming city was just part of an unfinished game, and it didn't feel real at all. But even now, after the release of 2.0, Cyberpunk 2077 hasn't fundamentally changed from what it was when it launched. At that time, the state of the game, and the console ports in particular, was terrible. And especially combined with marketing that was out of this world, it led to very justifiable outcry from players. People were promised a revolution, spent their bucks and had high hopes, but simply could not play the game. And that backlash just kept growing over the following year. It was like a snowball rolling down a hill, picking up mass and momentum over time. In an era of greed and overhyped AAA games, Cyberpunk became synonymous with everything wrong in the gaming industry. And eventually, the controversy obscured the game entirely. In all the chaos and anger and noise, Night City disappeared. With Update 2.0, Cyberpunk is finally transformed, and Night City with it. The patch notes do detail all the individual improvements and additions, but they don't really provide the full picture. All those little and big annoyances that got in the way before are largely gone now, and that's allowed Night City to become more than the sum of its parts. The beautifully and disturbingly real place it was always meant to be.